Idea, just sit in the back and bring it. I would be putting my feet up, not the air. There you go.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the Thursday, October 6th, 2022 Peninsula School District Board of Directors business meeting to order. If you would please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks everybody for coming out to Vaughn Elementary. It's fun to be in a different location. See some different scenery, and it's kind of old school. Different books and Tanya for putting us all together. First is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Is there a motion to approve the agenda? I move to approve the agenda. It's been moved by Jen. Do we have a second? Seconded by Chuck. To approve the agenda, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, motion's carried. The agenda is approved. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda prior to the vote? Is a motion to approve the consent agenda? I move to approve the agenda. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Natalie, seconded by David to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, motion's carried. The consent agenda has been approved. Next up, we have normally would have comments from the community. We have no speakers signed up tonight, so we will move on to 6.1, celebrations and recognitions. We have a big celebration regarding Peninsula Schools Education Foundation, and Jennifer Boat is going to tell us about it.
Sure. Thank you, Lori. I'm really excited on behalf of the Peninsula Schools Education Foundation to make an announcement that the foundation has generously donated $7,500 to cover the cost of tuition for the college and the high school program that is being offered at both of our comprehensive high schools. So real quick, for those of you who may not know what the Peninsula Schools Education Foundation is, PSEF, they are an all-volunteer organization that's been around for over 20 years, and they serve to really support educators in the classroom through direct classroom grants. They also serve to support district-wide programs. One that they support hands-on, for example, hands-on art, CAPE, the Girls in STEM program that goes on at the middle school level, things like that. And they also offer scholarships for students that are pursuing careers in education. So they're a fantastic organization, and I'm lucky enough to be sort of the school board rep that sits on the board. Chuck was as well, he served on that board. And they're always looking for more people, so anybody, I see you right there, Mr. Anderson. Oh yeah, you too, Mr. Young. Anyone else who is interested in a really fantastic group that does a lot in our community to give back to educators and students. Please check them out. So back to what they've done with this new college and the high school program, our students are able to earn college credit in their home classrooms. Peninsula, they have agreements with Central Washington University and UW, and then in Gig Harbor, it's the University of Washington as well. And so we have awarded 24 total scholarships, which is fantastic. For these students, 20 of them are earning 5 credits, and there's 4 students who are actually earning 10 credits this year of college credit. So that's a really fantastic opportunity, and I know Superintendent Barr this morning, you announced it at the Chamber Forum, and my understanding is afterwards there were some folks that came forward and said they were not aware of this program and they wanted to help support it as well. So please help us spread the word about that. It's really fantastic. Some of the classes are English, anatomy, physiology, French. So there's some pretty serious credits that the kids are able to earn right now before they even graduate. Anyone have questions about it, of the program or PSEF in general?
And I'll just add a comment that this is really exciting. My kids took both English and Spanish at Gig Harbor, but through this program, and it really makes a significant impact as far as the transferring of the credits, and it puts them their peers when they're just starting out.
Absolutely, just to be able to either graduate, maybe even early or just lighten your load freshman year. There's all sorts of benefits. So, yeah.
Are those classes a one-to-one, so the English class that they're taking is the same as the basic English class?
That's my understanding. Where's Mr. Gregory? Could I defer to you on that? I believe that is the case. I mean, it's a UW accredited course.
Yeah, similar to Lori, I've had 2 that have gone through and earned credit, and when my oldest went through, the English was not an option, and the comment I got was, it would have been a lot better taking this English class from my Gig Harbor teacher than taking it from the UW professor. So yes, they do transfer. The English 131 was one that all freshmen have to take, whether they're at UW or someplace else. So it does transfer directly. Some of the courses, depending upon the level, they may count as electives as opposed to major areas. But they are 5 credit classes, and they're mostly 5 credit classes. Those 4 students who took 2 classes who were honored with scholarships are earning 10 credits this year.
And it also is a little bit hard to follow in the how it applies to your transcript when you go, because it's a UW course. So if you go, in the case of my kids, they went to WSU, which is a semester system, and then so it ends up looking like a .66 if you take it, because you're basically getting 3 quarters or one, whatever. It doesn't translate directly like semesters, but it still is a right chunk, and it does translate. So.
And if I just might add, those 24 students, the Education Foundation prioritized students who were on free and reduced lunch. So the purpose is really try to eliminate any kind of financial barrier to students earning those credits while they're in high school. There are many, many, many other students in those courses, and many of us are writing checks for that tuition, but we really wanted, through the Education Foundation, to focus on students who might otherwise have a financial barrier. And we hope that that's just a start, because we know there are many more other students out there who we hope would take advantage of that if we were to eliminate that barrier.
So how can we support the foundation?
Good question. So in March, they're going to be having pre-COVID, they had an annual breakfast and lunch fundraiser where you could come be a table sponsor, write a check, and you get to hear from some of the educators who won grants in the previous year, how they used the money to buy innovative materials or things for the class. This year it's just going to be a luncheon, and I should have that date, but I don't. But thank you for asking. Mark your calendars for sometime in March.
Is it a can with like a usually?
Yes, it will be a can. Yeah.
Doesn't Peninsula School District donate to that foundation?
I'm sorry.
Support it?
The Principals Association, the Educators Association, they all donate. Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be nice if the board could all donate. Yes.
That's great. Item 7.1, we have a report from the Transportation Department from Dawnette, right? I'm really looking forward to this. I can't recall having a big update on the
And that's
transportation.
interesting to me, because I was told there was one every year by the
Well, maybe
professor.
it was.
And I'm like,
I'm
what?
not sure.
But I'm special, it's okay. Well, thank you for having me. I'm Dawnette, and I'm the Transportation Director for the district. Since this is my first board presentation, I thought it would be good for me to take a few minutes and just tell you a little bit about myself and my background. I have been in the student transportation industry for 31 plus years now. Prior to that, I was in the Air Force. And in the Air Force, I drove a bus. And worked on a dispatch bus. So clearly, transportation's my life. Part of my career, the first part of my career, I spent in California State, Washington. So California State, where I sat on the state board and was very active in the student transportation industry in California as well. About 12 years ago, I moved here to Washington, and I spent the last 8.5 years, I believe, in administration of student transportation. So I've got a little bit of experience there. I currently sit on the state board here in the state of Washington. I've done that for a few years now. In my I'm known within the state as an early adopter of alternate fuels. You may have heard that a little bit. In my previous school district, I had the ability to transform half of my fleet. It was a 45-bus fleet, and I transformed half of my fleet to alternate fuels. Most of that was propane. I did have one electric school bus that I brought in. Out of those 23 school buses that I transitioned into alternate fuels, I did about 20 of those using grant money. So I broke quite a few grants. So, yeah, that's me. So, also in my previous position, because of the transformation of half of the fleet, we were able to win a National Green Fleet Award because we had the highest concentration of alternate fuel vehicles in a fleet in the state of Washington. So we won a national award for that. So,
What district was that?
University Place, right across the bridge. Okay, which one is which? Thank you. So this is what we're going to talk about today. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my staff, clearly about my equipment, the way we're funded within my department, and just some other interesting tidbits that I'd like to share with you that you can consider. My staff consists of, in my office, I have one driver trainer, I have 2 dispatchers, 2 routers, 1 office manager, 1 supervisor who's here with us today, and myself, the director. All of these are full-time positions, 8 hours a day, and we bring together 122 years of transportation experience, student transportation experience. So that's kind of it. Pretty proud of that. Our maintenance side of things, we have 1 lead mechanic and 6 full-time mechanics that also have 94 years experience. We have 64 contracted drivers. That means they have a route that is their own. They're contracted on every day. And we have 8 subs. 8 subs is not a whole lot when you understand that they have varying availabilities for us. So unfortunately, they're not available every day. So 8 is not a lot, but we are working to recruit. We're heavy in recruitment right now, and we are running classes back to back as often as we can. Unfortunately, when you run a class for school bus drivers, it's a pretty intense program, and it's when you have a class, you get about 50% success rate. So it's not very high, unfortunately. The way we're funded in my department is through STARS, and that stands for the Student Transportation Allocation. Student Transportation Allocation Reportings. I know this. We report to the state 3 times a year, and those 3 reports that we give, the majority of the funding is based on these 4 items, which is number 1, the land mass. That's never going to change. We cover 109 miles. That's 109 miles is what it is. The next thing that we're, the major of the funding is based on is average distance, and that's average distance from a student stop to their destination, which is a school. That changes a lot because it depends on, from year to year what school a student might go to, varying other things. So the stop distance to the school can change. Destinations are schools. So it's not just our schools. That could be schools that we service outside of our district. If we had a student going to a school in North Mason and we transported them by a yellow school bus, we could count that as a destination, and that would give us funding as well. So those schools like Green Life and other ones. So our destinations does tend to fluctuate, but not near as much as average distance. And the main biggest driver for our funding is ridership. And that's basic and special programs. And special programs consist of McKinney-Vento, early education, and our PACE students. Our current funding right now this year is at just a little below $6 million. Our cost of operations for last year was at $717 million, excuse me. And our current budget this year is at $708 million. That $708 million includes the stabilization funds that we received due to low ridership due to COVID. And I'm going to talk about that in just a minute when I get to the ridership slides. It's going to tell you, and you're going to see a greater picture of that. But as we move forward into next year, we're no longer going to get that stabilization money. So So we're going to be looking at about a $2.5 million deficit in our funding for our department. So this is our ridership. This starts basic and special programs. We have 42 basic routes, 21 special program routes, which total to a 63 daily routes, 174 daily runs. So that's based on our 3-tier program. Some of our buses don't do all 3 tiers, so that's why it doesn't exactly equal out. But our ridership, as you can see over on the other side, in 17-18, we had close to 9,000 riders. And when we do ridership in stars, that's every student, every day, every way. So that's to and from. So it's basically a double. So our real ridership is about half, but the way we do it on the state report is every student, every day, every way. So in 18-19, you can see we got to 9,000, 19-20, almost 9,500. And then in 2021, we went all the way down to 800. And so you can see that's why we got the stabilization funds for that. This past year, we got back up to 73. That was great. That's a great comeback. And so far this year, we're tracking at right at just a hair over 8,000. So for our first report is due October 31st. So looking at our numbers as I was preparing this, we're looking at right about 8,000. Our equipment in our fleet, we have 34 of the small little buses over there with a capacity anywhere between 6 and 18. 29 of those are diesel and 5 are gas. All but 5 of those have a lift, which means we can transport our wheelchair students or any other students that need that accommodation. We have 61 Type D buses. Those are the big buses that are capable of holding a lot of kids. There are 84 passenger buses, but we seek them for 78 when we have them manufactured. So, and the reason for that is if you've ever been in a school bus as an adult, you'll know that even setting that 78 doesn't give you a whole lot of leg room, and at 84 you got none. So even our high school kids couldn't manage that. So we seek them for 78, so we have a total of 95 buses within our fleet. How we buy those buses is through the transportation vehicle fund, and I heard you guys had quite a conversation about that recently. So only purchases that can be made with the TDF is school buses or major repairs to school buses, and those repairs have to be pre-authorized by OSBI. So the way we get money into the TDF is by buying buses. So the state decides each year they get a bid from school bus manufacturers that sell buses in our state and respect to our specifications. And then they take the cost of that bus when we buy it, and over the next 13 years, which is what Washington State has said is the life of the school bus. After that 13 years, it pollutes too much, the cost effectiveness is too high, it's just no longer good for a school district to run. So over the course of 13 years, we're reimbursed what we initially paid for that bus. And then on a small bus, it's 8 years. So that's how we get that money into our TDF. And so clearly you want to continue to buy buses so that your TDF stays high. You can continue to have new buses and not old polluting school buses in your fleet. Currently we have 68% of our fleet is on the depreciation cycle. So we'd like to get it better, but we're not doing as bad as some.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Why do we need OSPI approval? I don't know, is that for to repair buses or to buy them? Why do we need OSPI approval? Why can't we have local control of what we do with our...
So the TDF is, the whole purpose of the TDF is to make sure that we maintain a fleet that is less polluting, less cost, and whatnot. So what has to be approved is the major repairs to buses, not the purchases of buses. The purchases of buses is done on the state bid through OSPI.
So if we want to fix a bus, we have to get approved?
Only major repairs, and when I say major repairs, I mean things that cost thousands and thousands of dollars that we wouldn't normally do. So like currently right now, we've got a transmission out for repair. We wouldn't have to get OSPI approval for that, but if I wanted to replace the engine, I would, because that's going to be quite a bit higher.
I just don't understand that they don't take care of our budget. Why do we need their approval?
Because they're the one that puts the money into it.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So currently, there is an EPA grant out. It opened in March and it closed in August. We did, let me back up just a little bit. The current administration has put more money towards yellow school buses than we've ever seen ever. And in doing so, what they did was they gave $5 billion towards cleaning up our school buses and getting old dirty buses off the road. It's broke down into how much you could spend on electric and how much could be spent on propane or alternate fuels, not necessarily propane. And that $5 billion is broke out into $5 million per year until 2026. Now on Monday, they just doubled that. So they're going to have even more grants available for electric, propane, CNG, and different kinds of alternative fuel buses. We did apply for that EPA grant because we're not a high prioritized district, meaning that we don't have a lot of free and reduced with low income. Our air quality is actually really good, thank God for the trees. So because of all of that, we're not a high prioritized district, so the likelihood of us actually getting that is not really high, but we have the higher opportunity of getting it if we went electric versus propane. We had to decide when we created the grant, when I wrote it, which by the way was the easiest grant I've ever written in my life. I hope to continue with that process. But anyway, because of that, instead of being eligible for $350,000, we were only eligible for $250,000 because we're not a high priority. And then we're also eligible for $13,000 in infrastructure. And the way that they're going to divvy that out is the high prioritized district will get the $350,000, but those are those people who apply for the grant and are high priority will have first come access to it only if they did electric. Then they'll go down to whatever's left of that $5 million. They'll go down to anybody who's high prioritized and did another type of alternate fuel. And then if there's any money left, they'll go down to the non-high prioritized, that's us. But the people who went electric will have the first option at it. And then after that, whatever's left will go down to any other alternate fuels. So as you can see, it was just to our best advantage to try to get the most money by going with the electric. Yeah.
What does ESD stand for?
EPA?
No, ESD.
ESD?
ESD.
At the bottom.
Electric school bus.
I'm sorry. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm so sorry. Electric school bus.
Got it.
And actually, so the $425,000, I thought I was estimating high. I talked to our dealer actually today because I wanted to get better costs. When I purchased an electric bus at my last district, I paid just less than, it was about $395 is what I paid. It was a type C, not a type D, but we can get into that later. But I paid less, it was about $395. We expected the price to go down the following year, and it did, by about $10,000. We expected the price to go down because the price of the battery is the major driver of the school bus, right? And as more get on the road and as the technology becomes better, the price is supposed to go down, and it did that first year. Now, the price, the supply chain and the price of petroleum and the price of sheet metal and the price of everything else went through the roof, which drove the price of this bus up. This price is now actually closer to $525. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I found that out today. So, which doesn't make the $250,000 look nearly as attractive anymore. It's kind of a bummer. So how do we go, or how or why do we go about greening our fleet? Well, number one, we need to. We have to. Because the emissions, the EPA has tightened up emissions so much on diesel engines that we're not going to be able to continue to buy diesel engines. First off, our Type A, our little buses, they don't even make them in diesel anymore. They're done. So we can't even get our hands on diesel in a Type A anymore. And there's a lot of manufacturers out there that aren't doing any diesels right now. There are some where you can still get them, but come 2027, when the emissions have to be down at 0.05, it'll be cost prohibitive, and that's because of the filters, the DEF fluid, and all of the things that have to go into it to make it go down to that 0.05 knots. Right now, the propane buses that I used to buy are already at 0.02. So right now, the diesel buses that you buy are at 0.20, which is quite a bit higher. So, in my opinion, propane buses will always be the best for student transportation. They're clean, 0.02 NOx, brands are available for them, less toxic emissions, and they have a very similar range to our diesel buses. So that's a positive on it. The electric buses are by far the most expensive, clearly. They are the cleanest, and there are brands available that because we're not a disproportionate district, we don't get the best. And of course, the range is extremely limited. They say they get about 125. That's not accurate. You're looking at best, you're looking at about 85 miles on a on an electric school bus. And that's very dependent upon the weather and the terrain. So as soon as it gets cold and you have to run a heater, you lose all kinds of range on there. You'll be lucky to get 65 miles. So the good thing about it is that in between the runs, you have an AM run and a PM run, you can come back, plug it in, and get an opportunity charge, and pop it back up, but you're still not going to get what you would out of any of the others. There's one other option in here that I didn't put on here because I don't see it as a viable option for anybody really, but and that's CNG. And the first reason why I say that is it's a more volatile fuel than propane is, number one, but the biggest one is that we would have to retrofit our shop to the standards that are required to work on a CNG vehicle. You have to do none of that with the propane buses. Okay, technology. So, yes, ma'am.
If I ask 2 questions. So the prioritization of the district, is there anything that we are not doing and/or are there provisions given for being a rural or more isolated? Because we travel quite far, right? Even though, many people think we're just in Deep Harbor, right? But out on the key visits, quite rural and isolated at times. That's my first question. And then the second question is, so the reimbursement, if in however many years, would we receive for an electric bus, would we receive $425,000?
That's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that.
Okay.
So the main reason why I purchased an electric vehicle in my last district was because it's a great business deal. It really is, because when you look at the TDF and how we're funded on the TDF, OSPI gives you the money on the purchase price of the bus. So then you get the grant I got was $350,000 for that bus. I paid $395, so it was a great deal. So, but that grant money, the $350 that I got, went straight into my TDF, and OSPI still reimbursed me over the life of the bus. So it pops up your TDF like nobody's business, and there's no stipulation that says you have to buy an electric bus with that money. You can buy whatever kind of bus you want to. So it was just a really good business deal. I'm sorry I don't recall provisions for
prioritization.
Right. I don't want to say 100%, but what I read in the EPA grant, I didn't see anything that stated that. They were pretty set. They had a list, they put it out, here it is, and that's what we
So it's just on free and reduced lunch rate?
No,
it's not.
No, there were a couple of different things, but I don't know that there was anything that we could have changed in order to get that. But I can get back to you on it, for sure. So right now, we've been running the same routing software for a very long time, and we are sticking with the same routing software. However, we've had these tablets in our buses for 3 years now, and this routing software doesn't play with it very well because it's the older version. So we're going to migrate, we have been migrating to the newer version of this software, which really plays nicer, if you will, and integrates with our tablets, which will allow us to push out turn-by-turn navigation on our buses on those tablets, so that when we have sub out on the road, they can be watching the navigation and know where they're going, take less wrong turns, and that's less parent faults for us. Also, it will have a newer updated parent app that comes out with it. And that parent app will allow a parent to, by putting in strict information about their child only, they will be able to pull up their child's bus information only. So they'll have pickup and drop-off time and bus stop location. And once everything is up and running the way you're going to get it running, they'll be able to actually watch the bus just like you can in Uber on your phone. So they can see where the bus is, so they can run out the door at the last minute all of those things up and running, we also will have the RFID card. Right now, every bus has an RFID card reader in it. That was part of the technology that was put in with the tablets. So once we get everything up and running the way it should, and we're able to use RFID cards, then Bobby will be able to swipe his card as he gets on the bus. Mom will be able to set up work and watch, oh, Bobby got on the bus, thank goodness. And then when Bobby gets off the bus in the afternoon, she'll be able to know if Bobby went home or if Bobby went to Johnny's house instead. So that's all really good stuff that we're looking forward to moving forward with. And we're in the works already, so it's moving forward, and I'm excited. Yes, ma'am?
About the parent app, do you know if that's going to be able to be integrated with the apps that parents already have?
So it is the same software company.
Okay.
So they may, my understanding is that it will be a newer app, a newer version of the app. So they may have to take off the app they currently have to put on the new one, but I'm not 100% certain about that. I don't. Yes.
What do you do, is there anything done right now for sort of auditing the number of kids on the different, like human audit of the routes and whatnot? And I only ask this because my mother-in-law is one of the many that we hear from who's always complaining about, there are buses all over the place and they're always empty. And I'm like, no, they're not. I know that there's like 4 kids to a seat on the bus, and we pull up and she's watching 3 buses go by and they're empty.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
well, and they may be going to a different location too.
No. These were after school. No. So I'm just wondering, because I know you use the software to do the route planning.
Mm-hmm.
But is there any point like an audit or a human gets on the route and goes around and kind of?
So I'm not exactly sure of your question, but yes, in the fact that each and every day we have our drivers report back to us, and this is new for them this year, but they report back to us that how many students were on each and every run and where they were going. Right. Some of those buses do have to go, pretty far out in each direction. Therefore, the ridership is lower because we just have to get buses out and they can't make it back to get to their next school in time. So unfortunately, this bus can only go to 4 or 5 stops, and this bus can go to 10 stops. It's unfortunate that we have to send a bus out, with that many kids, but just in the sake of time, that's what we have to do.
All right. But does somebody with the whole, like you, for example, really, I mean, the driver is on their route and they're watching their kids, but I wouldn't expect a driver to understand, like, all of the routes happening at once, right? Like, kind of like with airline route planning, right? Like, they have super sophisticated software to determine their route, but then they always have people that are, like, putting their eyes on it and looking to maximize.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. And yes, our routing software does optimize our routes. It for sure does. So what happens when we get the routing software at the beginning of the year, we can plot on the map exactly how many, 8th graders or 9th graders will be, 8th graders will be moving to 9th grade and be going to a new district. So now we've got all our high schoolers on the map, and we can see, the problem is we can see all the students and we can plan for all the students, but not all the students ride.
Well, exactly, and that's exactly why I'm asking about a human eye on it. Because
and that's what the technology that we're hoping to get that RFID card is going to be all about, because that's going to really help us hone in on who's on the bus. Because until, what would you say, 2 months into it, when we have the drivers actually report back to us, hey, here's the list of B-stays on your bus.
Yeah.
Now you tell us who's really on your bus.
Yeah.
So until that happens, we really are flying blind.
Yeah.
We're planning for the most, and sometimes we get.
Right, yeah, and I just know in case for me, like the optimum bus route, the stop closest was inaccessible. And even though the software is like, yeah, but it's only here. Well, no, you can't go, you can't get there from here. It's one of those situations, right? And a human would know that, but a software doesn't.
That's correct. And that's an unfortunate event where we rely on the community to let us know when that happens.
Right, and to be clear, you did. It was awesome. Okay, I called, I'm sorry, I should have led with that. You were very responsive, like myself and other people were like, I know it takes a while to get everything ironed out, and it was totally corrected. But it was definitely one of those situations where a human would know this, but the software wouldn't.
Right. Right. We're working to fix it. And the more technology we get, the better off we'll be because it'll be able to tell us those things. We're working towards it. Yes?
First, thank you for your service. Someone else came in first. Navy.
Okay.
I'm just teasing.
That's okay.
Air Force,
You guys are
Navy.
sitting next to him.
Just teasing you. No, serious, thank you for your service. What are you going to do to address the $2.5 million deficit?
That's a great question. We do the best we can to run as efficiently as we can. We are doing a lot right now in collecting data that hadn't been done in the previous years, to my knowledge. Looking for different ways where we can make those efficiencies on our runs and also bill out to different areas that should have been billed out that maybe weren't in the past. So we're doing a lot more data collection right now and trying to figure out how we can make those efficiencies.
So you're going to lean on efficiencies, and so what if that's, I guess,
Well, the unfortunate part of my industry and of my department is simply we have a cost to do business and we have to get kids to and from school, and it's not cheap, and especially when our land mass is divided by water and we have all the waterways everywhere. It's just not a cheap way to do the business that we do. And that's an unfortunate thing about STARS is it doesn't always take into account the land mass and the waterways.
David, I can speak to some of that if you want a little bit more
I'm
detail.
just going to look at you next.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the other things, so like Donette was saying with the fact that we're collecting data, we are collecting data. We're going back through all of our past buildings. So when we're talking about buildings and sort of leaning on the other districts, what we're talking about is like when we do Peninsula transportation, we own half that cost, the other district owns half that cost. But if we don't build out of the district, they don't pay. So that's one way to increase our revenues into transportation, the operational costs. Again, looking at the efficiencies as far as the routes, are there areas where we can sort of stack routes, or we don't have as many students on, this route, maybe collapse it, stack it with this. The issue here in this district, and like Donette said, is waterways. And when you start doing that, it does impact the amount of time our kids are on the bus. So a lot of it comes down to district priorities. So is the district okay with having a kindergartner on a bus for an hour and a half on the way to school? Or is that not what they want? So you look at all of that. You also look at streamlining some of your subscription type costs like you would with any other type of operational budget. And then you look at what's funded versus what's not funded. Okay, so the state funds to from. The state's not funding our activity runs. Those are purely funded via Levy right now. So when Levy dollars dip, we may not have funding for activity runs. Westbound Tech transportation, okay? So that's not funded. Any of your sort of midday or extra transportation type trips for athletics or field trips or any of those are funded by the state. So we have to come up with other ways to pay for them. So one of the things that I've been working with Donette on and her staff is let's really get into the data and see, is this truly a transportation to from cost, or is this a district level cost that, let's say, belongs a piece in special education, in CTE, and put the costs where they are? Because once we put the costs truly where they should be, then we know what our true deficit is for just the to from portion of transportation. Then we can work with our legislative reps to lobby and show the inequity of the funding for districts that are waterlogged. Because that's what's significant.
I know Karen's not here, but what about pre-pandemic, where we run in transportation at a deficit?
Technically, not by a huge amount, okay? A couple $100,000, obviously quite a bit different than the 2.5 million. The issue is that transportation is funded a year in arrears. So we're getting funded now technically off of what our costs and our funding ratios were for last year. Last year you saw that we had 800-ish writers. So that's why they threw that stabilization funding out there. Now with the legislation cut off and the fact that we're not going to be receiving receiving that stabilization funding, that's where you see now that we are going to be way down. Now, it's not just going to be us. It's going to be the majority of the districts. They're going to have to eat this one-year cost before we can somewhat right-size again. But the issue with all of this going to be in a district like this, as cost of living increases, as IPE, CPI, salaries increase, the state's not keeping up with that funding at the same ratio that is actually occurring within the district. And so we're always going to be a tad bit upside down until the STARS formula is reevaluated. But the goal is to get us closer to where we were pre-pandemic.
As we get further and bring more kids back, that'll start balancing. Okay.
Yes, we'll have to keep the cost for a year though.
Right, some one-time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I actually do. I have a procedural question. This is something that's come up a couple times. It is about how people find information new to the district about their bus routes, because I've heard sometimes if you don't type the address in exactly correctly with capital CT or NW, then you just can't find it. That was one. And then the other question I get is how do you send out information if there's going to be a change to your bus route, a last minute change, for example. So this is something that's been brought up particularly by our multilingual families who have trouble getting that information.
So currently, the way that we put out bus information for them to find their bus routes is to go onto the district website, go to the transportation site, and put in the address, just like you say. We try to have some really good specific directions on how to do that on there. You know, my experience has been that when we post a school district's worth of bus information in the newspaper, that's not really being very safe towards our children. It's that, to me, that's really putting information out there to some people that probably doesn't need that information. And I prefer to keep our kids safe. So that's something that, you know, we really felt strongly that shouldn't occur. We believe in moving forward with the updated software. We'll be able to fix some of those address glitches. Of course, there's always the call into transportation, which the first week of school we got well over 800 of.
Yeah.
so we have to lose a lot of those. As far as the notifications to families when we have a last minute change, right now we're doing our very best to get a hold of the school that's affected, the run basically, that's affected, so that they can put out a parent square notification to let them know, hey, your bus is running 15 minutes late today due to a mechanical issue or, you know, whatever the issue may be. In moving forward, once we get the parent app up and running on this situation, I'll be able to send out a push notification to just that bus's parents, and they'll get that on their phone, just like, you know, that is where I'm talking about. That answer your question?
Yeah. And then what's the timeline, your expected timeline for getting that out?
So my goal right now is to be able to have a complete data migration into the new software by, let's say, November 15th. and then have the parent app up and running by January 1. So when we come back after the winter break, my goal is to have it up and running. You're welcome.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Well, maybe first comment and let you maybe expand on it. So you were concerned about empty school buses. Out on the Key Peninsula, we have a program called School Bus Connects, where we utilize through a grant some of the empty school buses to transport because we don't have public transportation out here. And I know that was assigned to many of those from my other people. Does that pay for itself? Are we doing okay on that?
So School Bus Connect is ran by the grant, and I don't think it's 100% funding it. It does fund a large portion of it.
Okay. Another savings seems to be the sleeper buses. So some people like to be out in Long Branch, will take the kids and drop them off and then park the bus at their home.
That's correct.
And then pick them up in the morning and come back in. How many sleeper buses do we have out there?
I believe we have 10, Stephanie, do you think 10?
Oh, that's it? Oh, I thought we...
I believe it's right around 10, give or take 1 or 2. Yeah.
So also,
But can I back up though? Because the whole purpose of the sleeper buses wasn't necessarily to save us money, although in most cases, well, not in most cases, in all cases, it has to save us money in order for it to happen.
Right.
But the main reason why it was initiated in the beginning was to save parking within our lot because we don't have enough parking for the buses that we have in our lot.
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So, all our transportation stuff is right there in Purdy. And the majority of our buses come out of Purdy, go down 144th Street, through the intersection and back up. Would it benefit us to lobby the state to put an on-ramp at 144th and Highway 16? So that the buses could come out, turn right, go up, go right.
I love that idea.
Serving.
I can't tell you how much I love that idea.
Okay. It seems like something we should be doing, lobbying the state to do that. Obviously, there's going to be some cost incurred, but it seems so logical to minimize, because Purdy is such a congested area.
Sure is.
And that would eliminate half the buses going through the area.
Oh, more than half, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe half.
Yeah, that seems just like what we should be doing. Okay.
I love it.
I just have a couple, just
Sure.
quick things. First, the app, I love it. I park at a parking lot, take a bus to the airport for work, and we have an app, so if the bus is on schedule, you can see where it is, and if you're going to be late to work. So that's great. And just a question about Pioneer Elementary. Do you know about what percentage of students ride the bus to Pioneer versus being dropped off? I don't know if we have that kind.
You know, I could get that information for you, but off the top of my head, I don't have that information.
Okay, what about the students that are riding the bus there? I just happened to be up there the other day, which just caused me to think about this. Are they coming from, I remember what we discussed when the school was first opening, but I don't know what's actually happening. Are they running from hubs, or where are those?
That is correct. The Pioneer is all hub stops for Pioneer School.
And my last question is about, I'm going to ask this as a yes or no question, so that I don't put you on the spot, because do you think that we have the most efficient start times in this district, or are they typical of what other districts
Wow, you are putting me on the spot.
doing? Well, I'm not trying to not do that. Well,
So I think
yeah.
for us in our district, we need to have the 3 tiers
Right.
in order to transport the amount of students that we transport to the locations in which we do. So we definitely have to have a 3-tier system. I'm not sure what you're asking in the way of start times themselves. Are they spread out far enough for us?
Yeah, it works. It works. I mean, it's been like this as long as I can remember, so it must be working.
Yeah, I think for the most part, our buses are able to get to the locations they need to get to. And, you know, that may change as we bring more ridership back. And we may need a few more minutes, but for the most part, they're spread out far.
Thank you so much.
Is it really a yes or no?
Well, I just trying to make it easier. Anyway, thank you so much for.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions?
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Thank you.
Great information.
Donna, they were awesome. They fixed it. Good. Yeah, immediately. And I heard from a lot of other folks that when they called, it was like, it was pretty fantastic. So I should have led with that.
Thank you very much.
Right. All right, 7.2, school improvement planning. John Helwick and Dan Gregory. Good plans.
You guys come on up.
No, I think we're just gonna talk about how.
On the agenda, this suited.
Also, I think if you stay as much behind that podium as you can, it aids into the camera for the review.
We had a fabulous PowerPoint slideshow all prepared for you, but we don't know where it went.
John had a little eye on it.
Yeah.
It's in the cloud.
So I'll help clarify. So last year, we tried a different model, school improvement plan. We divided it. It was more like a speed dating. Got some feedback from some of you that you did not care for that. It's very, very challenging, however, to do 10 all in one day. If we did all of the elementaries and we gave them each 15 minutes, which you know becomes more than 15 minutes because then you want to ask questions and there's this back and forth. So if we gave all of the schools a half an hour to present all their information, that's quite a long night. So thinking about that with my staff, I said, well, we really need to bring it to you and say, what makes sense? How do you want to review the school improvement plans? They are due, isn't it October 31st? My birthday. It always is that because it's always like a treat. It's always a gift. So I really wanted you to have an opportunity to talk with the two, that plan this, and that we come up with a plan that makes sense, and that we're not here until 2 a.m., that is respectful of the staff, and that we have the right staff at the table to answer the right questions. So you didn't need to have all these slides, so, whew.
Oh.
Okay. So that's the intent is for you, yes.
Okay, since I've been on the board for 9 years, I've seen some iterations of how it worked. I know there were, unfortunately, some in the past board meetings where the board principals had to stick around and they went last after our business, and we were fortunately able to change that. And then we went through a period where maybe we had 3 schools at every board meeting and they spoke for 15 minutes and there's a couple questions. So we broke it out over that time. One of the things I remember is that we weren't getting the SIP plans until the board meeting. So we were literally looking at it for the very first time. And then that was prompting us to ask questions because we didn't get them in advance to try and nip some of that in the bud before they came in front of us. And then sometimes it caused us to put them on the spot and unintentionally. And then, so that seemed to work out better when we got SIP plans ahead of time so that we could reach out and ask questions so that they go through it and it was sort of already, it was more of a public thing for us. And then more celebrations. And then the way we did it last year, the way she said, for me, it was just, I did not like it at all. It was just too fast, too busy, too noisy. You know, you're trying to listen to the principal talk, and there's always grandpa just talking in the background, people are moving around. It's hard to concentrate. Some of the principals brought their stuff to the meeting, some of them didn't. It was just so informal that, for me personally, I absolutely did not like the speed dating format. So I'm hoping that the board can come up with their thoughts on it, but I like the format where we had maybe 3 schools at every board meeting with a short presentation, but we had time to review the plan in advance. That's my input.
Well, I just have a question. So what do you, I mean, we had a presentation, so what were some of your initial thoughts on the process and how to make it better?
So, what I would say about previous board meetings, David's exactly right. We were there really late sometimes, no matter what was on the agenda, even if they went first. And you're exactly right, Preston, if you get 15, it turns into 30 like that. Even when we gave them, we get 8 slides, whether it was Marilyn Wilson or Brooke, all of a sudden we get 15 that are turned back into us that you get before then. One way that we might minimize the, hey, let's try to get everything in, and let's give you all 5 of our goals, and here's all the data that goes with it. At the elementary level, if the focus is on elementary literacy, maybe you don't need to have everything presented to you about math and S&
SEL and everything else, maybe the presentation could be very focused depending upon what we decide either by school or by level. And that might be able to be more presentational, yet more focused and limited. And it wouldn't prevent you from seeing the whole plan, but perhaps the presentation and Q&A on that particular night could be just about a single focused topic for each school. Because it blows up pretty quick.
I think if there's some appeal to the model that we did last year, knowing that there's some concerns about, for example, noise in the room, it might be possible to do them in consecutive classrooms at a place like Swiftwater, where you have a lot more quiet and you can still rotate from room to room. I think there was a lot of appeal among the principals, and I think we did see that there was too much variance between what schools prepared, and that is something we can easily remedy. So I think maybe combining Dan's idea about focus, work, less variance, and maybe rooms instead of all in one big room as a way to consider something.
But the thing about that was that not all the schools brought the same level of presentation material. Some of them were very well prepared, which I appreciated, and some of them literally had an empty table. And we only had 6 minutes. So you're sitting down and there's 2 or 3 of us, and 6 minutes is that much time to hear the presentation and then ask a question. And then some of the, when I ask questions, so can you talk to me about how you're doing post-pandemic math, working on it? That was an answer, you know, a little answer was working on it. And for me, that's not very much on how you're working on overcoming math issues in the pandemic or anything else. I mean, if you want to do it focused, like you said, have a focus area, I would still like to get a more thorough plan. Here's where we're at in advance, but maybe they only focus publicly on that one area. But I want to know, are our schools improving? And I want to get all the data.
And I think that's what it comes down to, and I really like John's idea also, because the principals do appreciate that. I have to honor my colleague because elementary went first. And you can see what went well, but you can also see, wow, there was a wide variance. And why not observe and learn? So when we did secondary, we got together as a group of principals and we said, what are we doing? We're all going to be similar in terms of how we do this. We have the ability to control that. First time out of the gate, that's hard because you don't know where people are going to go. We have the ability to control that. My wondering is, I love your question. We'd like to be transparent and out with all of it, but with 17 schools, with up to 3 to 5 goals each, I just don't know that, I can't even do the math in my head on a Thursday night, but that's a lot of minutes. So I guess our question is, what do you want us to bring to you during an open public meeting, and what do you want to study outside of that open public meeting is another way to catch that wondering, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so I think that to me the biggest difference between future set plans and the last one is the strategic plan, right? And those metrics, right? That now we're all, working from the same script. So for me, and I think kind of our role as the board is to have the view up here, not the view down here. And I like the idea of potentially, we know what our major metrics are, right? 3rd grade reading, 9th grade, on track to graduate, our key metrics. And what, for me, would be really helpful would be able to see all of those metrics identified, and then as it applies to each school, all of them where they're at, like kind of in a large format to be able to see it ahead of time, right? Like I don't want to sit down and be doing, spreadsheet aerobics in a meeting. But what would be, in my mind, good to hear would be, where are schools doing well in meeting the goals of the strategic plan, and where are they having their greatest challenges? Kind of a, best case and worst case, and kind of thinking on those things. But what I struggled most with the SIP was that it didn't feel like we were reading from the same sheet of music. So it's like one school is evaluating certain
things over here in SEL and math, and the other school's evaluating, reading and STEM. And I was like, okay, great. But if we're not aligned with our plan and we have those key metrics and we talk about, what is working to be successful and what is not, I think that would help us understand the variance across schools, right? And maybe the schools as well, like how are they matching up?
Can I start? The previous strategic plan was done 8 years ago, and it was very detailed. It had metrics, it had growth goals. So like it was a 5-year plan, and we wanted to see like 5% growth, 5% growth. Some schools are already way up here, so their growth would have been smaller incrementally, and some, but so their SIP plan, don't make it wrong, their SIP plan came and addressed the strategic plan growth in several areas. And they went through this slide, and they talked about growth. And some of the questions, because we were only getting it that night, was like, why this cohort's not growing or whatever. And it became cumbersome. But those SIP plans back then were around the strategic plan. Where they got, what took so long is that they had to talk about each one of those metrics and why they weren't hitting their growth goals. And so you're spot on that. But they were all the same. Their SIP plans, if I'm right, had to look exactly the same, format was exactly the same, because they had to get key topics that were aligned with the strategic plan. And then over time, that went away. Like when Rob got here, he brought in these 5 pillars, we sort of got away from it. And it was, I'm just saying, it changed over time. So I'm agreeing with you is what I'm saying. That
Yeah.
How do we do that in a timely manner? Yeah, so that we're here in the strategic plan, and they're all on the same page. How do we do it and get the information that we want and have it be timely?
To add to that also, to be clear about what a school improvement plan is, so it's not just a wedge, we're consistent across the schools in what we're looking to improve, and also if we can tie that to what we are being graded on by the state.
Yep.
That's what the outside world
Yep.
is looking at. So I would like to see some data that shows growth in exactly that pretty little sheet that
OSPI, yep.
So, and growth in, also if we're looking at growth in reading, in all, special ed growth, PACE growth, general ed growth, the way that we're measured.
Disaggregated.
Yes.
Yeah.
October 31st is right around the corner.
Yeah.
And you haven't even, not you, the district hasn't even given the board the metrics of the strategic plan. So how are you going to bring this SIP information in 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, when we don't even know what the metrics are that are going to be tied to the strategic plan?
So I disagree.
Okay.
So the metrics that we had identified and had already reported, not school by school, but level by level. When we had the conversation about 3rd grade reading, 5th grade math, like those are the metrics by which we will be measuring the elementary. So they are accountable for all of those. Now, internally, so reporting back to the board, if you want 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, we can do that. But we chose the large metrics, the 3rd grade reading, the 5th grade mathematics, right? Those, remember when we went through that information in the fall?
Yeah.
In August.
Okay.
What's on that OSPI report card? Can
Yeah.
you break it down by grade?
Down by grade, or is it?
Any metrics?
You can break it down by school, I think.
Yes, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade reading, ELA.
And that's one. So when it will say, for example, 54% proficient, what am I looking at? I know I can do by school or by district, but
You can disaggregate all the data by demographic category or by special program category.
okay.
Those are quite helpful when we start talking about some of the strategic plans speaks to eliminating achievement gaps.
Right.
Yeah.
And those are quite helpful. We've done some work recently with middle school and high school principals, and we didn't get fancy. We said, here's the link to the OSPI report card. Where are your gaps? And they're pretty obvious. So that disaggregated data is quite helpful.
Yeah, because it matches up against state averages too.
Yes,
Yeah.
so, but that's the academic achievement. We also had panorama data.
Right.
Right. Sense of belonging. So each of your 5 goal areas. So maybe that's where we start. Maybe that's where we start. We align that. I think the bigger question is not the data that will be, is how do you want that delivered? Do you want 3 for every board meeting? Would you like to have all of the elementary in a larger, longer meeting? Do you want, I'm responding to some of the things that some of you individually told me, and that's why I know that Dan and John, we want our principals to be able to deliver in a manner that makes sense.
How are larger districts doing this? Like, does every principal in Tacoma come to a board meeting?
Absolutely not.
That's what I mean.
No, that's not done that way.
Right, so
Yeah.
what are some ways that this is done in other districts?
There's a variety of different ways. Sometimes the board will get just electronic versions, and then certain programs will be highlighted, or schools will be highlighted as an example of an X. Many times at the OSS, so the schools that were identified as high needs, they would come and have an evening, maybe in a school, and then there would be more of an interactive. They would be responsible and accountable for the data, but they would also be talking about the interventions and how they were using the MTSS and what the programs and what that internal data looks like, as well as the external data. Because internal data, so we're talking about DIBBLs, or iReady, the data that wouldn't necessarily be on an OSPI. Right. That's why we might
I will tell you, like for 3rd grade reading, that's going to be more accurate than the 3rd grade SBA.
I'm sorry,
Not that that's not an important metric, but
The what?
if you're going to say what's the most accurate measure of 3rd grade reading, it's going to be the spring 3rd grade DIBBLs and iReady, depending on the grade level, rather than the state test, just because the state test is
Yeah,
not
I
as-
know, and obviously we're concerned with what's actually happening.
Yeah.
But we are held accountable to.
Which means we can report on public.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah,
So
you can
can I-
have all of them, and that just gives ammunition to like, hey, this.
Yeah.
Can I put a little twist on that? The data that will be brought forward to you November, December, if we do 6 meetings, if we do 3 meetings, that's 6 meetings, so we've got to kind of project that out. The data that they are generating their action plans off of is really last year's data, unless they have some stuff beginning this year. My wondering is, can we produce that data to you, and can the conversation be more around the action planning that they're doing now and will continue through the year based on that baseline data? Because I'm hearing growth, which is what we're looking for, but the exciting thing is we've got a strategic plan. You're all going to be measuring the same thing.
Yeah.
And now you should be, I'm going to speak for myself. Do you really want to hear about what they learned from that data and the action planning that they've got in place with their goals down the road in these checkpoints? What are we hoping for? What are we hoping for at the end of the year? I don't know if data can be kind of fun to talk about, but action planning might be more interesting to say, what are you doing about it?
Is there any info from we did this last spring? We heard about a lot of the interventions. Do we have any short cycle? I mean, use the data to show that these interventions have been successful so far, and therefore we move forward. Yeah. Okay.
I know that we used to have previously, and I'm going back because that's just a side-by-side comparison. After that last strategic plan, and we had our 5-year goals, there was a little one-page, that little holdout or whatever, that showed what the goals were. 5% growth here, 3%
Or dashboard.
Yeah, the little dashboard, and you could actually hand that out to the public, say, here's what we're doing. And I remember James's meeting and talking about the difference between the OSPI and what we're doing. I do not remember that being a presentation to the board about here are the metrics that we're going to attach to our strategic plan. Because for me, if we're going to get to 95%, like, for me, I don't want to see the school district, I'm speaking for me, I don't want to see the school district revel in the success of being 5% up better than the state average, when the state average in math is 30%. I want us to be at 90% or 100. And how do we get there? And I said this during our retreats, developing this student plan. If we're currently, at 50% in math, I think that's about what I remember, about 50. How do we get 100? Because Chuck said, I want all our kids to be able to do math. I want all our kids to read. It was really depressing to see how many of our high school students do not read proficient, but we're might be above the state average. That doesn't impress me one bit. Like Natalie said, what's going to make someone move to the Peninsula School District is going to be how we score on those, So I want to see 85% or 100, but how do we get there? And that's what you mentioned, the growth. And then their plan would come say, this is 5% growth over year, and that just gave us something to build on. I'm fully aware we're coming off a pandemic, and things are going to look weird this year, but I think we need to set the stage for future SIP plans, that they can come back and say, 23, here's how much we grew growth-wise year over year, and it might be from 55% to 60%, or whatever. It still shows solid improvement, but I just don't remember that presentation of James saying, here's what we're using for metrics for our strategic plan. Like if I went to the strategic plan on our website, all of our metrics that we are tying to the strategic plan, are they on the website that I would be able to see that data? So, just curious. My job as a school board member is to make sure that our community
Absolutely.
at the 30,000 foot level, I should be able to look at a spreadsheet and see we're on track. How you're doing it, our job is to hire her. Our job is not to tell her to do her job, but it's certainly our job to see if it's working. Okay? At the 30,000 foot level. That's all I'm saying.
So the purpose of bringing this as an item is that I want to be responsive to how you want to see things in addition to what you want to see. So I think the what I'm hearing very clearly, and our staff is hearing. And that does not deter from where we are. I think what I want to know is what is the how. If you want them to come up with a plan to say, we'll do 4, 4, 4, I know that high school graduation and high school needs to be a separate conversation. That needs to be really a graduation / high school symposium style and we already talked a little bit about what that could look like. But if we're talking about elementary, middle, and high school improvement plans, I think I just want to press back and say, what makes sense? If that's what you want collectively as a group of 5, and you want to have a few every meeting, then we can do that.
Right. Can I this just popped in my head. What if we had sort of like a roundtable discussion, remember years back where we did the big table, we had other people. What if we got the SIP plans in advance, and then we had the big auditorium, or even we rearranged the community room where we have a meeting, and we all sit around the square table, and we have the schools there, and you have the board there, and we sit around there, and we already have their plan, and we just say what's working and what's not. Instead of they each present for 15 minutes, why can't we just have some kind of a roundtable discussion for elementary and then middle school? What's working and what's not? How can we help? Something like that.
Well, that's what we had planned for the high school graduation format. So that would align to, and what I'm hearing very clearly, and I don't know if I'm hearing it from everyone, but I'm hearing that you want to have the plans and time to really dig into that data. And what we could do is give them the plans and then have time during the day, and you could come 1 or 2 to clarify any questions that you might have, about data that maybe you're curious, so that you have your questions ready for that roundtable.
And I think some of
For
what,
them, I just tossed that out at the board.
I was just going to say, some of what Preston referenced is, we can provide however deep, however wide we want with principals. I think one of the questions that we need an answer to, that you probably want the same answer to, is how much of that takes place outside of the school board open public meeting,
Yeah.
and how much time do you want on a Thursday night to go through that?
Yeah, my question is, I really like that idea, because I liked well, I'll put it this way, I think there's been pros and cons to all of the ways I've seen it done in the last few years. So trying to take the best of each, and getting it ahead of time and having time to electronically, just read through, because that was like too much information. But I would be interested in actually asking the three of you if there is a way that you have seen, even in another place, that you found to be particularly efficient. Or the other thing, and this is just my opinion, is that I don't want it to be a waste of time for the principals. That we're going to get the data anyway, so we don't need to make them all do a presentation, just for the sake of having a presentation. I want it to be enjoyable, and I want, the thing I really liked about that, I understand the pitfalls with the one format we did, but I loved having other people besides just the principal. Like some of them had students, and that was what made it really real for me. It was like meeting, and this is, I brought this student who's doing this such and such program or whatever. That was really great. And so if there's a way to, I would prefer to see people.
Well,
who have seen it.
in smaller districts, if you have less buildings, I mean, in the district that I came to, there were 5 buildings, so we went out to the building, and then the building did the presentation of their SIP plan, but they also had student performers, they had parents there. We don't have the luxury of having a small number, so I think that is the challenge. How do you do that in a way that's meaningful for the staff, that the principal is accountable for the accountability measures, right, and the metrics, talking about how am I going to narrow my gap, whatever that is. If I have 85%, that's different than a conversation at a school that is at 45% and the measures that they have gone through. And you want people, I want the principals to be able to have those deep conversations, because that is what growth is about. And we also have metrics around panorama data, around belonging, right? So there will be information that they probably would love to go through publicly about this is what we've learned. Like we were at Mentor Creek today, and some powerful conversations occurred because they were not satisfied as a staff. That's really powerful to hear, right? That they would, and what they're working on. So let's take it back, and we will present to you a couple plans. I'm just thinking this. Can you tell? Some options, and then you can give advisement as a group which you would like to do.
Are we giving you enough now?
Yeah.
Too much input?
No. I hear some things very clear. I hear that giving them the SIP plans early is super important, because they need a chance to look through that. And those are available for the whole public, so the whole public can also see those.
And one of the things that, years back, there were some board members that were really, and I felt bad for some of the principals. They were just like, run to a gauntlet. It was awful. So I agree with Lori. We don't want them to come and feel like, oh my God, I don't want to go to that board meeting where you're going to get excoriated. We want them to come and be accountable. If they know, like what happened in Mentor Creek, they know that, hey, we have some work to do here. They can still come to that roundtable and celebrate. Here's some great things we're doing. But also hold themselves accountable. And hey, here's the work we have to do. But if we've seen that in advance, we don't have to put them on the spot and publicly humiliate the principal. We don't want to do that. I just want to know that they know they need to fix some things, and are we on track?
Well, you said, what works, what's not working. I think if they know the questions, even if they're more conversational, they know them in advance, and has some time to think about it, that's going to help them. And I think
In
the conversation
plans in
with them-
advance would be, allow us to do that.
And the other thing that I might suggest, I love the idea of regional. I really am happy that we're out here on the Key Peninsula. I think honoring the places and the spaces. So maybe we could think about like a feeder pattern kind of group. So then we would have all of those schools that would feed in, and maybe we include the middle school. So let us talk about that, and you know, it would be awesome to be in a school when you're doing school plans. I do feel strongly about that.
Yeah.
So let us put our heads together.
That would be awesome, actually. That's great. I get really excited about that idea. Just like that, you know, if you had the feeders all together and you were at like Harbor Heights or whatever, and you had Goodman and all that.
I kind of like that idea.
Can I have one other thing? What about this? It comes up all the time, and it's something I think about a lot. Is tracking the COVID cohort through our school improvement plan, right? Like, is there a way that maybe this is a James Cantline magical data man question, but is there a way to particularly track that cohort as they move through the system? Because I would like to see that.
So one of the questions we had at Chamber this morning was about what was the learning loss?
Yeah.
And it was answered really well. The one thing I would add to that is there was disparity in learning loss.
Yeah. I believe it was heterogeneity.
I don't know why I said that word.
It was.
But there was disparity in learning loss.
Yeah.
To comment on the feeder piece, and John had mentioned questions, what are the essential questions you want answered? Thinking back to Natalie's question about desegregation, maybe it is a feeder pattern piece, and maybe one of those questions is what are your biggest challenges and what are your action plans? If you do it by feeder, the challenges tend to be similar by feeder, and then you get to hear each other on how they're addressing those similar challenges. It also becomes a little less competitive at levels, so it's a little more collegial and collaborative. But yeah, just thinking about when you said that, I was thinking, wow, the desegregation really did identify students without connectivity.
Yep. Exactly.
You know, you've probably heard it before that the education of the mother is the best determinant of what the student will achieve. When you think about those different demographic categories, they kind of fall into what really created greater disparity during COVID.
During COVID, yeah. Yeah, and then carrying those through, layering those over the feeder patterns, I think could be really revealing.
And the question that we have asked principals to answer, and then we had to ask ourselves as district folks, is if we know that, but we don't give everybody else the same thing, what are we doing differently that's going to provide some catch-up?
Right.
Just a couple of thoughts on what those essential questions are.
Thank you.
I've been waiting for this discussion because I think it needed to happen, and I just wanted to make sure that we were doing what makes sense for this board to get the information and the style and manner in which.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for raising questions. All right. Next, 7.3, levy discussion. Ashley Murphy's here to present to us. Thank you, Ashley. Thanks for being here.
Presentation all the way for right now.
Right, I almost said that.
Okay, are we ready?
No.
Okay, well, regardless, we're going to get started. I know people probably want to get home. Okay, presentation is going to be on our educational programs and operations levy, and introducing the idea of safety, security, and technology levy. Okay, so there we go. Our current EP&O levy expires in 2023, December 31st of 2023. So levies are on calendar years, and we have a full calendar year left of the current levy that was approved by voters in 2020. The levy that was approved by voters in 2020 was for the calendar years of 21, 22, and 23. You can see the varying collection amounts that were approved by voters with an estimated tax rate of $1.50 per year. Obviously, those tax rates vary based upon multiple assumptions that we'll go over later in the presentation. So the levy spending plan was designed to support board goals at the time the last levy was adopted. So now, our levy spending plan is designed to support our strategic plan and our goals set forth within that strategic plan. Levy funding provided for this district makes up approximately 18% of our overall budget for revenues in our general fund. 18% for any district is actually a fairly significant portion of your overall budget. In larger districts, for example, Federal Way, their local levy only makes up 7% of their budget. Again, yes, but being a more diverse and higher poverty district, it means they get more state support and more federal support, whereas Peninsula, being a less diverse, less poverty district, we get less state support and less federal government support.
I asked you, what did North Basin get?
North Mason's levies
Percentage-wise.
For what?
Percentage-wise.
Their levy support is less than 18%. It ranged anywhere from about 9 to 11% during the time that I was there. But they are higher poverty and they are more diverse, but smaller. So, okay. So with the 2019 legislative passage of ESSB 5313, it changed the way that we can actually collect levies and the process for collecting our levy authority. So starting in 2020, we have a new levy lid. That levy lid is a lesser of criteria. The last time the district went out for a levy, there was a $1.50 lid per thousand of assessed value, and that's what the district was going out for levy. Now, after that attempt, it changed. The legislature came forward and they said, okay, maybe $1.50 wasn't enough. We can see the school district funding isn't going to be sufficient to maintain operations, so they upped it to $2.50. We also have the ability to collect $2,500 per student, adjusted for inflation annually, for districts with fewer than 40,000 students, which is all districts but Seattle.
Yeah.
Okay. So Seattle Public Schools, they get another line item where they can collect more. Now, beginning in 2020, this district's ability to collect off of a tax rate per thousand assessed value changed. We can no longer collect based upon this $2.50 per thousand assessed value because it would create too much, the state feels it would create too much revenue coming into our district because we are considered a property-rich district. So we have to collect the lesser, which is the $2,500 per student inflated by CPI. So you can see sort of where the levy lids changed for the district between 2019 and 20. An interesting occurrence in the district that's capped at a per pupil amount is the idea of a levy rollback. This occurs more often in a district that's under a per pupil structure. What happens is we do some math, we look at some long-term planning for enrollment growth, long-term planning for what we feel our property values are going to do in the future, and what we're expecting from the next 3 to 4 years worth of legislative sessions. So we compile all this data. Then we try to determine what we would be allowed to collect from the community and turn it into a tax rate or a millage rate. Now, these are all based upon assumptions. So because we're capped at a per pupil amount, if property values increase at a rate higher than what our original assumption was, or your student enrollment growth isn't what you thought it would be, you enter a situation where you have to roll back your collection. So, the community approved a 2021 levy amount at just over $25 million. But in 2021, we couldn't collect that full amount because we were capped. So we had to roll it back, and we could only collect $24,156,000.
And to be clear, that also coincided with the cap of shifting to per pupil.
Yes.
So that was a rollback based on 2,500 per pupil.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And that's, so in your prior levy, you weren't seeing that continuous rollback until the year that McCleary got decided, and then we changed the levy rules, and they capped everything at $1.50. Then pretty much statewide, everyone was rolling back in. But then post that situation, the district ended up having to start the rollback again once we switched to a per pupil allocation. So for 2022, the community had approved $26,900,000. Again, we couldn't collect that, we were capped, so we rolled back and we were collecting just under 25.4. 2023, same thing, we approved, the community approved just over 20 million. We can't collect, the state says no, even though the community said yes. And so we rolled back and we were collecting 27.6 million for the calendar year 2023, so this upcoming year. Each year, the CFO certifies our levy with the county based upon all of these assumptions, and we have the county do the calculations to roll us back so we can at least maximize what we're bringing in with the levy. And so the 2023 values right now are based upon preliminary estimates that were received showing that this community's property values increased on average 24%. So our total levy rollback over the course of 3 years was $3.1 million. So that's $3.1 million that the community said we want Peninsula School District to have, but because of state legislative caps, we weren't able to collect. Therefore, the district never received it. It was rolled back, therefore never collected from taxpayers. So overall process and timelines when it comes to a levy, particularly here. So August, September, that's when we're doing work behind the scenes, right? We're trending out our data, we're trying to determine what our needs are going to be in those future years, we're trying to determine what's going to be happening with our upcoming legislative session. We're looking at our enrollment, we're looking at post-pandemic, what can we expect? And we start modeling all of those assumptions to determine what we would need to ask for levy and when we should be coming to the table to ask for that. So the discussion also occurred during this time frame on duration of levy, because we can run up to 4 years, so are we running 1, 2, 3, 4 years? And the potential for a safety, security, technology, or I like to call it the SS&T capital levy. Now, one thing to note about that is the state allows collection of what is more commonly referred to as a capital levy. Capital levies can be used in a multitude of ways. One way we see school districts utilizing it is for infrastructure development. Maybe they're retrofitting a school or building on a lead, whatever it happens to be. They're not going out for a formal bond, they're going to go out for a lesser dollar value and they're going to do it for a capital levy. Another way that a community can utilize a capital levy is through collecting dollars to help offset the costs of safety, security, and technology. So it can't be people, but it's the infrastructure, it's the actual physical components that can be capitalized. So that's what can be wrapped into this SS&T capital levy. So October 2022, meet with the board through a board retreat. Just discuss preliminary information, findings, what are we looking at, have that board discussion. Tonight, October 6th, we're having our first board meeting regarding any future levy attempts. And I'll make recommendations based upon all of the data that has been collected, sort of the collaboration with key stakeholders, information we've received, and the trend data that we're seeing as far as financial needs for this district. October 20th, our next board meeting, You'll receive the final recommendations based upon any feedback I received here tonight or any feedback that you guys receive from the community over the next few weeks. And then we'll bring a levy resolution to the table, either 1 or 2, depending upon which route we're going, for our first reading and discussion. After that, we have one more meeting in November, on November 9th. And so, in the meantime, I have to submit a preliminary plan to OSBI on if we have an approved levy, what would we be spending it on? Because there's levies now are capped as far as what we can utilize the funding for, and we'll see that in another slide. So I submit the plan to OSBI to get approval. We need that approval to actually pass the resolution and run it. And then on the board meeting on the 9th, the intent would be to bring those resolutions to the board based upon the criteria that's been given back to me, and we adopt a resolution for resolutions. December 16th, 2022 is the filing deadline with the county, so we have to get all the information over to them by that date in order to actually be on the ballot. And then February 14th this year is the special election. Okay, so estimating levy authority versus financial needs. So this is all the behind-the-scenes math part that occurs in order to determine what is a reasonable ask. What is the district's needs at this time based upon a multitude of criteria? So we take into account our student enrollment. Obviously, we've seen a decline in student enrollment post-COVID, but we did see a return of about 339 students from last year to this year that have returned that weren't here during the peak of COVID. So that's really positive. We still have some more to go. We're still about 6% down overall from pre-COVID. We look at our assessed valuation. So what is it currently and what do we expect it to be based upon statewide trends, nationwide trends, current economy over these next years? Because as the valuation changes of property, so does your tax rate. Now, for a EP&O levy or a capital levy, even though you'll see a tax rate and a dollar value on the ballot and in the resolution, technically the tax rate itself doesn't count. We can only collect the dollar value approved. That's why we see that tax rate fluctuate, because we're capped at the dollar. So when we roll back, it decreases the tax rate. As property values increase, it decreases the tax rate, because again, we're capped at that dollar amount that we're going for approval. Then we're looking at our rollback capacity based upon our allowable per pupil collection. So we know, and we've already seen that we are starting to, the students that we lost during the pandemic, they're starting to come back. So we want to make sure that we have enough resources to continue with having the proper staff allocations and the proper supplies, equipment, technology needs necessary to have it on hand when our students start looking. Then we start looking at our financial assumptions. We've all seen increasing the consumer price index, so our CPI is increasing. The implicit price deflator, well, now their federal work for cost of living is also increasing, and it's increasing at fairly staggering rates. This district, Peninsula School District, amongst other districts in Washington State, we are losing our legislative hold harmless and stabilization funding that we received during COVID and during last year to stabilize this year due to loss of enrollment. That impacts transportation, like we heard earlier from Dawnette, because again, we're being funded a year in arrears and we weren't transporting as many kids last year. And so that's what puts us upside down. And then we have the capacity to continue to fund that. Surprisingly enough, in the transportation world, the state has determined that special needs transportation is a state-funded right. Okay, so they will fully fund that. But to from basic ed transportation is not considered a basic education right. Therefore, they can get away with underfunding it. Lots of federal lesser dollars. So the federal government pumped a lot of dollars into a lot of public entities, not necessarily just school districts, in order to get through the COVID pandemic. Unfortunately, well, I mean, it depends how you look on it. Look at it though. Unfortunately, this district didn't receive very many ESSER dollars. We still have the same COVID costs. COVID didn't impact this area any different than it impacted the other areas, but we received less dollars to offset that. Therefore, we had to rely on our reserves and our fund balances in order to get through the last few years. Okay? So now those ESSER dollars are gone from this district. For example, federal rate got over $100 million in ESSER dollars, but they are not, they aren't sitting there 10, 12 times our size, but they received that much more than we did. So but their poverty is higher, therefore that's how the federal government was utilizing the title poverty ratio in order to put the funds in what's considered the most neediest districts. So unfortunately, our district relied on fund balance in order to get through a good chunk of that. So our decreasing poverty percentage, our poverty percentage here in Peninsula School District is decreasing. So as the poverty percentage decreases, we receive less support from the state and federal government. And loss enrollment over the COVID period also equates to less state and federal funding. Okay, so when we start looking at levy and drafting, we have a levy. What's our spending plan going to look like? What's considered an enrichment activity now based upon this post-McCleary timeframe of levy? So levy collections need to be used for EP&O that's not funded by the state's education funding program. So enrichment has been deemed by the state to mean that we can fund items that are outside of the prototypical staffing model. We can fund things that aren't funded by the state, like athletics or midday transportation runs, but we can't fund items that haven't been considered a basic education grant. So there's some other items that we can utilize our levy for, like additional course offerings, which we do here, activities associated with early learning programs, which we have, additional salary costs attributed to enrichment activities like if we run summer school or extended day programs, anything like that, we can help offset the cost of levy dollars. And basically, any enhancement that OSDI determines is an enhancement. That's why we have to do more spending plan. Okay, so this should look familiar. So, the Peninsula School District has done a really good job in the past of really itemizing where their levy dollars go. Levy dollars here go into these main categories. Okay, so staffing over state FTE, which means that those are considered enhancements. So this is certificated actual classroom teachers that aren't funded. For example, middle schools, certificated funding. We get funded for approximately 50 teachers for middle school. We can't run the number of middle schools we have with only 50 teachers. We can't have a robust offering of classes if we only have 10 teachers in the school. Okay, so we end up having to utilize some of our levy funds in order to make sure that we can have that robust class offering. Counselors, we heard during the presentation during the last board meeting, we are funded for 20 and we have 31. So the other 11 comes either from an offset of state apportionment by not filling other positions and through levy. Paraeducators. The paraeducator field is not significantly funded by the state, and it is heavily funded either through special education for special ed student needs or through levy. Professional development is also a category that most school districts utilize their levy funding on. To invest in the staff to make sure that the instruction being given to the students is the best that it can be in hopes of increasing our students' achievement. Safety and security. Obviously, this is a key one. The state funds 1.6 classified level security individuals for this district, total, 1.6. And I say classified level individuals, so when they're funding that prototypical funding formula, they're giving us about $48,000 total for a classified level individual for that position. So if based upon market comps and all of that, you have to pay more in order to attract and retain highly qualified staff, the district has to pay the difference, and we have to do so through Levy.
So I just wanted to clarify, the state pays us $48,000 for safety and security personnel. For our
48,000 plus an additional 0.6, because they fund 1.6 times the 48.
Entire district.
Yeah, and that amount they'll increase by whatever IPD factor they're going to be utilizing that year, but yes. So a lot of the times, and individuals say, okay, well, they're funding X number of staff recruitment. It's like, they're funding that portion of the formula. So they'll fund, $98,000 of an administrator. So if that administrator is paid more based upon the bargaining agreement, they don't fund it. Building allocation. So our building budgets, getting like the school supplies that we have been giving and funding for elementary age students. All of that comes through Levy. Classroom furniture, our library enhancements. The state does fund some dollars for library, but anything in excess of that will need to come through local levy. Extracurriculars. This is one of the most glaringly obvious pieces. So the state does not do any type of extracurriculars for our athletics as part of the basic education, right? So they fund $0 of it. So everything that has to do with any type of club, even co-curricular activities, let's say yearbook, that has a classroom day, but then also has an after-school component, not funded. And all of our sports, drama club, the arts, all of that, not funded. So we have to utilize our levy in order to fund those, or we wouldn't be able to offer that type of those types of activities for kids. And we know that sports and drama and the arts and band, those are things that keep some of our kids engaged and in school. So they're important. But it's costly, obviously, and that's where we take it, we take it from levy. Replacement cycles for a multitude of things, not just computers, lunchroom tables, regular furniture, equipment, trucks, vehicles, garbage bins, because we run our own garbage program, our technology devices systems, curriculum adoptions, obviously we want to have good, robust curriculum, all of that comes from Levy. And then our preventative routine maintenance projects, so this is painting, carpeting, roofing, all of that would also come from Levy. Okay, so at this time, what we would be recommending, based upon a multitude of work done behind the scenes to determine what our actual needs are, is that we run an EP&O levy on the February 14th, 2023 special election. That we run it for 3 years, basically repeating the same cycle that was approved last time, which was a 3-year levy. And we run it at the amounts below. Now this is based upon per student estimated amounts. Of course, we have to forecast out what our students would be throughout that per pupil allocation amount. So actual levy amounts for each of these years that I certified by the end of November, we would be seeing that rollback again if the students don't return at the rate that was estimated. So in 2024, it would be $29.7 million with an estimated tax rate of $1.25. 2025, just over $30.7 million, again with an estimated tax rate of $1.25. And 2026, just over $31.7 million with an estimated tax rate of $1.25. One of the things that I want to point out is when we were going through the data, we were going through the needs, we were very attentive to looking at the tax rate. What will this costs our taxpayers. The last levy that the district ran was for $1.50 per thousand. And we wanted to come up with a plan to keep a commitment at that dollar threshold, okay? So on the EP&O side, we're seeing $1.25. Again, if we have to roll back, that tax rate will be less than $1.25. You're going to see another piece of it in some of the next slides. Okay. So, to lead into it though, what I want to sort of show here is our Pierce County School District's total tax rates. Okay, this is broken up. Your pink down here is your educational programs and operations. So that's your what people normally think of when they think of levy. So Peninsula School District, all the way down on the other side where you see the sort of low line bar, okay, that's our total combined tax rate. We have two pieces of our tax rate sitting out there. We have our current EP&O, which we are requesting to replace through board action. And we have our bond, okay? So the combined tax rate between both of those is sitting just under $2, and this is for 2022. Now you can see our other Pierce County neighbors and where they are. So 40 is giving us a little run for our money, and they're a few cents under us, okay? But everyone else, well above. One of the things I want to point out though is, do you see the blue? Those are capital levies, okay? So all of the blues you're seeing are districts that have run capital levies for either building the homes or for safety, security, technology, capital levies. So for that sustainment of those programs. So we would like to put forward an additional consideration. We are asking for a safety, security, and technology capital levy this time around. Multiple reasons. One of them being the financial constraints due to the lost enrollment, which is starting to increase, but the lost ESSER dollars, the lost stabilization and full term dollars that we're seeing from state and federal government, and our overall just increasing costs, okay? We all know from a personal standpoint, your electrical bill goes up. Well, when you have as many facilities that we do, and your electrical bill goes up, you're seeing $100,000+ increase. Your insurance rates increase, like your liability insurance. Okay, now we're seeing an additional $400,000 there over a year. So this inflationary cost out there hitting us hard. So one way to help offset that and make sure that we're still being able to offer really robust and innovative programming that is in line with our strategic plan is to offer dedicated funding for safety, security, and technology. So by doing this, we carve out dollars that are there just for these programs. So it allows us to begin to have sustainable funding models that we can upgrade our paging systems for the remaining buildings that aren't done, camera systems, making sure we have plenty of cameras in all of our buildings. The big sensors that Chris was talking about during his presentation last meeting, I believe it was, door locks, cybersecurity applications, all of those pieces. It also allows us to do capital improvements to facilities not considered preventative or routine repairs that enhance safety and security. Think fencing. We're increasing the number of our transitional kindergarten classes. So these are young kiddos, 4, just turning 5 years old. We need extra fencing to ensure that we don't get a road runner who runs into the street. This type of funding helps offset those costs. It helps with technology infrastructure improvements, the payments for the fiber that was installed. All of that can be put through this type of dedicated funding. We're replacing sites for devices and classroom technology. The Promethean board is making sure that we can get this technology into the classrooms at a faster cycle than what we could do if all we had to rely on was our EP&O levy. And it allows us to provide better student devices in line with our 21st century industry standards for devices, like Chris was talking about. If we only supply the basic Chromebooks for our kids, they're not going to be able to function at the same standards that a more expensive but more robust device would do. So at this time, we would be recommending that we also run a concurrent SS&T capital levy on the February 14, 2023 special election for a duration of 6 years. So capital levies or safety and security levies can be run for 1 to 6 years. So basically, we have our EP&O for 3, and then the SS&T would run for 6. It would be a flat tax rate of 25 cents per thousand of assessed value. So you saw on the EP&O side, you saw the $1.25 and the commitment to keep that there. This is where the other 25 cents comes in to get us to that $1.50 that we ran with the last levy. That 25 cents would bring into the district, committed specifically for safety, security, and technology, $6 million in 2024, going down to 2029, where we would be collecting just under $7 million. Okay, but again, it would be, when we run this, the dollar value is what technically it is collected. So even though as of right now it would be 25 cents based upon all of the data, if property values increase, that tax rate decreases, so it would technically be less than 25 cents.
Okay, so it's subject to rollback just like every other measure.
The dollar value isn't subject to rollback because we're not on a per pupil for a capital levy. The per pupil is for EP&O only. But the tax rate is subject to rollback based upon increased property valuations.
The tax rate?
Yes.
So you
What
pay
the
the check.
taxpayers are paying.
So these numbers of $6 million down to nearly $7 million,
That could
that's
change.
what's stable.
Exactly.
And then how we get there based on property value.
Exactly. Okay. A lot of talking. This is your turn for comments, questions, discussion.
Would you be able to, so with the numbers you put up, the EP&O would be a $92,138,000 at a fixed rate of 1.25, and we're not able to round, I mean, that would be in about, on the vote, but 92,138, is that correct?
Yeah, broken down by year, but yes.
Yeah, the exact amount.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the SST, the Safety Security Technology, would be $9,339,000 for 6 years, at again, at a fixed rate of 0.25. Would you, the board approves and says forward smartly, would you be able the next board meeting have a slide for us and for our community to show all of them combined? Like you showed us the tax rate of all the districts, school districts around the county, but could you bring us one that shows, here's the forward bond, here's the future approved EP&O at 1.25, and here's the future if approved of the SST at 0.25.
Exactly.
So do you remember what the bond is around 0.25?
The bond right now is 44 cents.
Okay.
And so the overall combined tax rate as of right now would be
Just under $2.
$2. It was $1.98 total.
Yeah, so
I'll bring this
even
up.
with the fact that we would have an EP replacement levy
Correct.
and a companion safety security technology levy, our combined rate for all three would still be the same or less than the current pay.
Correct.
So my question, could you bring a slide to the next board meeting that shows that so our community can see that?
Exactly. So yes, on the board meeting on the 20th, I'll bring a slide for that with comparables for the rest of the districts. So right now, if we were to go this route as proposed, as you can see right now, we're currently sitting at just under $2. The reason you see that it would not change, even though we would be adding a capital levy or an SS&T levy, is because our EP&O rate for the 2023 calendar year drops to $1.13. And so all we would be doing is putting it back up at the level that it is in this year. But I'll bring that slide because that will be a better image of what we're looking at.
You look at me?
Yes.
Okay. Can I ask an obvious question? We just heard from transportation. Transportation levies?
So there's sort of something called a transportation levy, but it's to fund buses, not operational costs. And a lot of times those levies are used when, let's say, we don't have a transportation director, as Ray has done that, who's really focusing on the number of buses on our depreciation schedule. If they happen to not spend the money and let all the buses fall off their depreciation schedule and have to go out and purchase new, they're not going to have enough money to do so. So they will either have to transfer money from their general fund into their TDF or go for a TDF levy.
A TDF, do any districts have those?
There has been a few attempts years ago in our area. They weren't successful.
Yeah.
So a lot of districts just make sure they hire competent directors who are going to manage the depreciation schedule. Now, we may end up seeing more of those levies with this, with the laws being enacted regarding diesel engines and gas engines, because we've heard those alternative fuel buses are more expensive, and you have to put the money out to get the money in.
Sure.
So we'll see what ends up happening here in the next few years.
Okay. And then you talked about, I think these are, for most of us, for me, the most kind of powerful way to understand what is considered basic education and what is funded through the state and versus what we are then locally responsible for. So your statistic of 50 middle school teachers total for the whole district, which you can just anecdotally think that's a little less. I think we would run 4 middle schools with 50 total teachers. 20 counselors, again, for the whole district. I know, I remember we had 1.6 nurses for the entire district. Is there a way to kind of bring some of these forward also at the next meeting so that we can really understand, like, we're talking about real people and what it really, that it's not enrichment. You know, I know the state calls it enrichment, but this is not enrichment,
Yes.
right? Having a health tech or a nurse in every school is not enrichment. So,
Yes.
if we could have a little bit of detail around that, I think it's really helpful.
Yep, we'll have put some slides together for that. For example, like when Chris presented, he gets funded for 4.7 people total
Right.
to operate as many devices as we have. We wouldn't technically be able to operate that with just that many people. So yeah, we'll put some stuff together with very staff.
A question about the enrichment. We need the enrichment levy approved by OSPI, but if we do a safety, security, technology levy, we don't need the approval for that, correct?
No, and the only reason we have to get EPNO approved by the state is because the state wants to manage what we're spending our money on for levy.
That is interesting though. Why one and not the other?
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned curriculum is not included in basic ed.
They give us some dollars for curriculum. It's an underfunded area, not a fully funded area, especially nowadays when a lot of curriculum is actually going digital. And so some people think, awesome, you get it digitally and then you just own it. No, the company's got smart annual subscriptions. And a lot of times we do annual subscriptions per pupil. Not based on per pupil number of students utilizing it, but what's your district enrollment? And now that's how we're going to charge you.
And then another question about the, so the safety, security, and technology levy can't be used to fund any salaries.
Correct.
So if we're looking at things, obviously, we have identified this as a target area that we can work on in our district. So cameras and vape sensors, for example, to monitor our high school, particularly parking lots and such. We then, if we were to have this levy, we could use those money to purchase the equipment and offset maybe the behavioral interventions and professional development from our regular.
Exactly. That's
So
how we
work
do it.
in conjunction,
Yeah.
things and people.
Exactly. Any other questions, Justin?
Yeah, so a couple think I asked this when we talked before about changes coming through the state for regionalization. Do you see anything in the pipeline there that's going to help fix some of these problems in the near future?
So, I would love to say yes, it will be fixed. The problem that we're seeing, if I were on some Peninsula School District is going to be seeing, is a lot of the work that is being done to enhance funding is being done for high poverty, diverse school districts. So, last year, the legislative body got together and they enhanced counselor allocations and gave more counseling FTE to school districts, not to Peninsula School District, but to districts that are high poverty. So even when they're coming to the table and they're talking about enhanced funding, our district will not necessarily be able to rely on it unless it specifically goes out and has nothing to do with the demographics of the school district. Now, there's been talk about changing some of the prototypical funding formula. The problem is that making a change at that level is extremely costly. The state tends to funnel money into school districts in cyclic cycles. So they just have spent quite a few years pumping money into school districts because of COVID. So now they deem that we're out of COVID. So I'm not certain what type of funding priorities they will put for school districts in this next legislative session. My hope is that we will get something. But to what level, it's too early to tell.
Can I speak to that as well? So I'm on the roundtable with Bruce Frankel, that was the PI superintendent this week, and he reiterated the fact that there are some extremely expensive fixes, regionalization and staff mix. So that means that our more expensive teachers, if they made a larger change and we were able to say, oh, we have this many senior teachers, which we used to be able to do that, we no longer can do that. So I'm not convinced at all, nor is he, that that will be this legislative fix. I wish, but I did not hear, oh, absolutely, we are going after that as a priority.
And that existed in the past, staff mix.
Staff mix?
Yeah.
So here's the downfall with that. Post McCleary, this district received and still does receive through this year a 4% staff mix ratio inflationary factor. Okay, so we received 4% on the prototypically funded positions.
Grandfathered.
Yes, grandfathered is, okay. That period is now ended, and so if we are to continue to receive it, we would need the legislature to take action during this session, or as of next year, we receive 4% less revenue. So now they're one of those financial constraints that we're looking at.
I'm almost afraid to say it. At some point, I would love to be able to really understand that formula. Everybody laughs, but we've all kind of seen it and heard it, and it's like, oh my God. Sometime in the future, I'd love to.
Yeah.
So are you asking for the regionalization? So there are some districts that are rolling back into regionalization. They were 16, now they're going down after a few years as well. So I know that there is there's a work group that is working on that, but to actually change it to be more equitable, they would have to go across, like, they're not crossing the water, even though we had one of the highest growth in Pierce County. That really is not taken into account when we look at regionalization numbers. Because our more northern neighbors on the Kitsap received higher regionalization, and they have lower house prices, so.
So the other one is just a comment. We need to improve our technology in the classrooms, in places. I would love to see us get to the point where we're teaching more technology, code teachers have the tools. This doesn't expand us to actually teaching more to the kids in the technology realm. I'd love to see that because that's the future.
Wouldn't that be a CTE class?
Yeah. Putting that up.
It wouldn't be CTE in elementary, and so if we're gonna have robust offerings in middle school and high school, we start in the elementary.
We would, yep. Yep. So,
They already know more than us.
I think, yeah. Valid statement. Any other questions?
Just,
Go ahead.
yeah, and maybe just kind of thinking about other factors to help us as well as the things that stood out in my mind from the retreat, talking about the, regardless of enrollment size, the cost of doing business increases that we've seen post-COVID that are 2 and 3 layers behind students, but are still very real for us. For example, certain types of insurance, for example. I mean, the obvious ones are gas and these kind of things, but would it be possible to maybe see some of these kind of things that proportionally were not necessarily, they weren't things that we were paying for with extra dollars. They were just part of the cost of doing business independent of enrollment.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I haven't heard the example just off the top of my head. We pay $100,000 for recycling, to recycle materials. It costs us $100,000 because we're in a unique area that businesses on the other side of the bridge don't want to service our area. And the local recycling business went out of business. And so we had to go with a different company who has more of a monopoly, and we pay $100,000 for recycling. So if we didn't have that service, we'd either have to create our own program for recycling and bringing recycling materials off-site, which we've been in talks of doing and creating our own program, or we'd have to cut recycling altogether, which obviously doesn't work.
can we cross county lines?
Yeah, technically we can, but they can't, I guess, or cross the bridge on.
I was just thinking, because I'm looking at that chart for the last time. When you come back to the 20th and you finish into the cumulative one, and you have what the slide, and you try to make one, or you have one that shows just a EP&O, and then a slide that shows just SST, and then the combined, so that it's a little more
Comparative to these districts?
for us.
Yeah.
For us, yeah.
Okay.
That way it's a little bit more, we know what it means, a little more easier for the community.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dave, I couldn't hear you. Was that a comparable assessed value districts? Is that what you asked for?
No, I asked for a separate slide that shows this, or the 6-year rate for the SST levy.
Yeah.
And then show a chart that shows a 3-year rate of EP&O, and then a final slide that shows everything combined.
Okay.
That shows it all to the numbers.
Okay.
So, and I guess, what do you need from us tonight? Just
Can I piggyback on that? Like that same slide for comparably assessed districts as well? Okay. Because we are an outlier in Pierce County in that realm.
Yeah, I will say that when I was looking at all of our comparables being not only Pierce County districts, but districts of our comparable property value size.
Right, yeah, assessment.
Yeah, we were 4th lowest in one and 2nd lowest in the other as far as the amount of dollars that we're bringing in from local levy to help support our kids in our.
Yeah, because in some, depending on who you talk to, that in some ways is more accurate.
Yeah.
and it goes back to, it's not like someone can say, well, we're the 4th lowest in the state, who's making that 4th lowest in the state in Front Texas. We should charge a lot more. We can't.
Correct.
The key is that people need to know that we can't
Yeah.
charge more. So we're not doing our job by asking for 700 million. We are capped.
Well, and that's one of those inequities that the state has put forth with these type of situations. Peninsula School District is sort of between a rock and a hard place in the fact that the state says that based upon our demographics, we can't get from them more revenue. The federal government says the same thing. that means that all of our surrounding districts that aren't in this situation, they're able to bring in more dollars to offer, additional programs, sometimes without having to tax their community individuals, and still be able to collect healthy levies to help enhance their program.
Well, I just wanted to thank you so much for all the tons and tons of time that you put into this, not only at the retreat and just behind the scenes, but also into putting it into a format that I think is at least begins to help persons who don't spend all their waking hours working on these funding models. It begins to try and help us understand it and that we can take to the public and such. And so I would just ask if there's anything else that you would like us to consider, or if there's anything else you need from us tonight.
I don't think so. I'm going to go through the recording and jot down the request for the additional slides. Normally, our first slide deck is a little bit more brief and it's more robust than the second one based upon feedback. And so we'll get into some more of those details during the next meeting, and we'll go from there.
And we don't have, we would have to vote on that for the resolution next meeting, but we don't need any kind of from us tonight to tell you to move forward, correct?
No, and you don't even have to vote at the next meeting. So the levy resolution vote will be occurring November 9th.
Okay.
So next meeting, again, it's just coming back with the rest of the data information that you guys want. Now, if you're out in the public and you hear something or you hear additional requests for information, send it my way, and we can wrap it into the presentation on the 20th as well.
Are we going to be doing a first reading of the resolution language? Okay.
And then the next meeting also community comment, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, next item on the agenda is a report on the WASDA General Assembly that was just attended by David and Natalie. The WASDA is the Washington School Directors Association, and they have a General Assembly every year. And districts attend and have a vote, and so these were our two representatives this year, and they are going to give us some. Oh, okay. Okay, I'll go first. As I was not, so all board members can attend. All boards only get one voting member. So David was our voting member, and I attended just to watch the process. And this is an opportunity for all of the school boards in the state to get together to focus on what our priorities will be heading into the next legislative session. And a lot of it has to do with just changing language in WASDA's permanent positions. So there are a lot of professional agencies and associations around the state representing principals and administrators and teachers, and this is the group that school directors belong to. So this is our one collective voice. So when we are lobbying and when we have support on a number of topics, this is our greatest push. So we get together this time of year and determine those priorities and what we're going to write, what we'll keep as a permanent position, and what we want to change or add, amend, or so I just wanted to start my part of the presentation with some takeaways. There are about 295 school districts in the state of Washington, and we are elected board members that represent our communities. So at this last meeting, only 106 districts showed up to vote. So if you do the math, that is roughly 35% of WASDA's population showing up, which means 65% do not show up whatsoever to vote on what our priorities will be. And I, through the process, kind of understood why. For each item up for discussion, every district gets one vote. So it's a one-to-one. You see the results. For example, something as basic as, do we want to change the wording of this position from WASDA encourages all school districts to support X, Y, or Z. Let's change that to WASDA supports school districts, and so changing happiness to glads, and things that aren't really impactful, ranging to things that are incredibly impactful, especially when we're talking about how we levy taxes, how we fund transportation, how we're going to advocate for hopefully fully funding basic education, improving special education funding.
So as the votes come in from any one of these positions, we can either just go with what that initial vote said. So 65% of our membership supports this change and 35% doesn't. Well, each district gets a weighted vote based on the size, their population of students. So Peninsula School District, based on our population, gets 3 votes in what's called the weighted vote, whereas Seattle gets 13 votes. So what can happen after the results of the initial vote come in, if 5 districts get together and call for a weighted vote, then we go to another vote. So in that vote, Peninsula only gets 3 votes, whereas Seattle gets 13. And oftentimes what I found will happen is if this is not Seattle's priority, it's not happening for WASDA. And we watched it happen time and time again. So as a representative of the Peninsula School District, what I found is in October, when we go to Olympia to lobby for these very important changes, we're lobbying for school districts that don't have the same needs that we do, our families, our staff, our teachers, our students. So my main takeaway was WASDA right now is not working for all school districts. They are not working hard to be equitable in the representation of all school districts. So I would like this board to maybe take a look at writing some of the amendments. And the amendments, by the way, come from school boards around the state. And they can come from individual members. So you can see this amendment was posed by the Peninsula School District or by Natalie Limberly as an individual on the Peninsula School District. So I would like to propose that we look at drafting some language that makes it equitable for smaller school districts. So, there were plenty of occasions on which what we want is also what Seattle wanted, so fine, that's a win. But on many of the votes, I think David will talk about what some of those were, it flipped, and it's the expectation that all boards will then go and lobby for what happened at this General Assembly. It's our responsibility actually to this district and people we serve to maybe ensure that WASDA is representing us more equitably than Olympia.
Yeah. So in the 9 years, I'm almost finishing up my 9th year in the school board, and all 9 years I've been on the school board, I've been the legislative rep. There's been multiple school directors over that time that have been the legislative rep. I'm the only one that's been the legislative rep the entire time. And I've either served on the WASDA Resolutions Committee or the Legislative Committee the majority of that time. That's an elected position from our regional board directors. It's like Lori's WIA, something like that. She's elected for our athletics. I've been, routinely elected as a regulation committee for resolution legislative. In the years past, the resolution committee would meet a separate conference, and the legislative committee would meet a separate conference, and it got expensive. They combined them. Now it's just called the General Assembly. But over the years, as Natalie said, I've been watching these positions change year over year in more specific direction because of these large school districts. This year we had 162 positions to review over a period of 2 days, and they either come recommended by WASDA as a do pass or do not pass. And like she said, some of them are basic. I found it just unbelievable that some of the most basic ones still had this discussion. It's like people just had the need to talk. But I think the process was really eye-opening for Natalie, and I appreciate that we both agreed it's sort of time to change. But we saw these big districts, and I'll say some of the more big progressive school districts in the state, Shoreline, Seattle, Issaquah, Spokane, that they didn't like the outcome of the vote, called a weighted vote. And it's very frustrating because I believe that the reason almost 200 school districts in the state didn't show up for the conference or ever show up is they feel their voice doesn't matter, they're disenfranchised. And, I see this year over here, but it's our first time to see it. But an example, the most contentious one, I just have to share it because it's one of those ones, like you said, you would think would make sense. But during the heated part of the pandemic, several organizations, national organizations, one of which is the NSBA, and there's another one I won't mention, petitioned the DOJ, all those acronyms, to label parents domestic terrorists. And that didn't go over very well nationally, and a lot of state school boards, state education organizations withdrew from the NSBA, National School Board Association. And so this one particular position was submitted by a couple school districts that felt it was important that the Washington State School Directors Association reinforce that we care about parents and families and that they're important in the lives of students. So the position said parents and families are important stakeholders in their children's education. Simple enough. We think that would be pretty easy to get approval. And the statement was, WASDA supports parents and families as important stakeholders in their children's education. Studies clearly show when parents and families are involved and engaged, that significantly impact on student academic success, wellness. Schools should reduce barriers to parents and families participating to improve connections, collaboration, partnership, and transparency. That, believe it or not, out of 2 full days, was our most contentious position. There was all this back and forth over it. Some of these larger school districts were saying we don't need it. They were actually accusing these smaller districts of nefarious actions, or why are they doing this? It was comical to listen to this go back and forth. So we ended up having a vote, and the language, the resolution, or the committee rationale didn't quite make sense with the vote recommendation, which was do not pass. Because even Watson said that it's really important for parents and families to be involved in their kids' education. So one of them just didn't make sense. It's almost like it's a mistake. So we went back and forth, and most of these positions and discussion, even with the weighted vote, was over about 15, 20 minutes maybe. This one lasted almost an hour. Just all the back and forth. So we called for the vote, and it passed against WASDA's recommendation. It passed. So then, Shoreline, I think, called for a weighted vote. And I'm like, here we go. And so we went into a weighted vote. Then we met in person. The last one we had in person was in Spokane. And Leslie Hart and I attended that meeting. In person, when you call for a weighted vote, they lock all the doors. No one that's outside the meeting can come in. It's like, if you're not here, you don't get to vote. It's pretty interesting to watch. They don't do that on the Zoom meeting. But anyway, they call for a weighted vote in 5 districts. You had Seattle, Shoreline, Issaquah, Spokane, and one other, Everett. So we had a weighted vote. And it failed. And people were pissed that it failed. Because we weren't asking for money. We weren't even asking the state legislature to take this up and turn it into a bill. It was just a WASDA speaking point that we value families and parents. So fortunately, one of the small districts in Eastern Washington, knowing the Roberts rules, called for a reconsideration vote. So WASDA, heads exploding. We need to go into timeout, take a 15-minute recess while we review the Roberts rules. And so they came back and said, okay, I think they said we need 5 school districts to recommend or say they want a reconsideration vote. And we got those 5, it was our school district. So then we had to have more discussion, more back and forth. There were school districts all over the state saying, if this doesn't pass, there will be school districts across the state pulling out WASDA. This just doesn't make sense. The media will be involved. There's all these things going back and forth. It was just, all my years, this is the most contentious one, which just seems to make sense. So they called for another vote, and it passed. What happened next? Weighted vote.
No.
Same pie, called Way Road. And I'm like, unbelievable. Only this time, I think another school district complained about why this was important, that the way this time failed by this much. The way so it passed, the way instead of failing, it passed. So it actually moved forward. But it just goes to show, and Natalie said that these large school districts sort of are, they have a bully pulpit, that if it doesn't go their way, they just call for a weighted vote, and they get their way. And there's a couple others I want to talk about that really the school districts, small school districts, were begging them not to pass. And the big school districts overrode and passed it. So I agree with Natalie. I think our school district has an obligation to reach out to WASDA and recommend that this is broken and we need to fix it. Because these small school districts, 2/3 of our school districts in the state don't show up. They don't feel they have a voice, and it's just not right. So, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for attending the conference.
I would say I appreciate that, just the explanation of what sounds like a long process, because I do think it's important to note that because on the surface it looks like people just aren't invested or they're not caring enough to go to, from these districts, right? Elected people are just not going. But when you hear how it goes, I know several people who sit on school boards in really tiny districts in parts of the state, and you can see why it would not be worth their weekend to do it. So I appreciate that explanation.
So that might explain a little bit too of why the funding mechanism is the way it is for the larger cities in Seattle. Was there any resolutions or anything in this session talking about changing the funding mechanism?
Yeah.
I assume there.
That was another heated one that I wasn't going to discuss, but that was another heated one. A different position that was recommending to this was a legislative position to recommend the state increase the funding from $2,500 per student to $5,000 per student. So the small school districts were saying, we're having trouble passing levies at the current rate. Now you want to raise it to $5,000. You're going to be going out with, instead of a $92 million, you're going to be going out with a $200 million EPO levy. And they would never pass it. So the small districts were asking the big districts, saying, we'll never pass it. This is only going to favor you because you have mega millionaires in your district and $1 billion Fortune 500 companies that can pay those taxes. And it'll only widen the inequity between the large school districts and the small school districts. And it passed. It passed. I mean, it failed. Okay? They recommended we do it. It failed because of the small districts encouraging it. It failed. The big districts called for a weighted vote, and it passed. So in spite of the small districts pleading that this is not good for us, it passed. So that was just another example. Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate that. You taking time to update us. No old business or new business, so superintendent's report.
Well, I will be brief. I want to thank Vaughn community for inviting us. It's very nice to get out and about. I will be coming back here tomorrow morning because my superintendent walkabout is here at Vaughn. And the principal, as I was walking in, she said, "Oh, they're all ready for you." And I'm supposed to dress appropriately in the Vaughn Huskies, even though that's hard for a cougar. Ugh. So I just want to say how absolutely wonderful this month has been to being out. We had our first learning support walkthrough, instructional rounds. Thank you, John, for planning that. But we were out in Winter Creek, spent some time in a kindergarten class, in first grade class, and looking at instruction and looking at the mindset and the work that they're doing. It's pretty amazing that we're only in the first month. I mean, it's, for 5-year-olds, just their habits and routines were amazing. So I'm just, every time I'm in our schools, I'm just so impressed with the instructors and just the mechanism of how the system works and how happy the kids are. Last year we circle time. That was very apparent. You know, we had masks, we had, you know, the distancing, social distancing, and everybody had their own little table, even in kindergarten. And boy, today we saw kids right together, sitting on their little colored circles, and they, you know, they just were so engaged, and the teachers were engaged as well. Homecoming is tomorrow and also next week for our school, so I'm looking forward to that. I've been in the high school, and their colors are gold and black, I believe, and they're all ready for tomorrow night, so I'm looking forward to in Carver tomorrow night and Peninsula's next week. Okay. We're kicking off the Peninsula Reads, and so be prepared for more, but as a board, we need to be thinking about your favorite childhood book, and we need to get the photos flowing, so be thinking about that, because we're going to be tagging you and taking your picture and asking you why you like that book. But we had an opportunity, my team, I want to thank my team. This is the first time we've presented as a team at the Chamber Forum. Everybody took a piece to that, and it was really, really well done. So I'm very, very pleased with the work that we are doing, but it's also nice to have a great team with you. I want to thank Donette for coming on board. She is a superstar and an Air Force person, as an Air Force kid. I just want to thank you for your presentation, but moreover, I want to thank you for the wonderful work. You've really changed a culture and a climate, and I think people are just so happy, and I know our kids are better off because you're a leader there. And Ashley, as usual, I just want to thank you for also coming on board on an interesting time. Like, hi, you get to run a Levy, like, ta-da! But you do that with grace and humility and a little bit of humor. And our SST is an interesting concept. That safety and security and technology is so important for us to reach the goal of innovation, which is one of our key strategic plan goals. So I just want to thank you for being so thorough and so willing to do whatever we need to do to understand it. I know that that will continue as the public as well, because it's super complicated. School finance is really hard. And it's not that way in every state, you know? So Washington is singularly difficult. I just want to let you know that I'm working with two other women leaders in this region. We will have the first Pierce County Regional Women in Leadership in the spring. I do have a tentative date, but we're still planning it. But I'm hoping that some of you would be willing to come and be a part of that. We will be opening that to all Pierce County women in leadership. One idea is that we were going to look at the business model. Gig Harbor is singularly, I think, poised where we have many of our key leaders at this time, from the mayor to myself, which I will not sit on the panel, but to other leaders who happen to be females, and many of them the first time in their role leading. So I want to thank you for hiring me as your first female superintendent. But I'm also encouraged that regardless of gender, that leadership is really difficult right now. And elected officials have a singularly difficult time. And so how do we encourage people to step into the roles that look so unattractive from the outside? Whether you're, whatever your gender, whoever you are, because we need a pipeline, like we need to leave a legacy, right? And then lastly, I would just like to, I'm so grateful for all of our community partners. It's apparent every day. Dan and I were sitting in an education chamber meeting that was really, really aspirational and really was talking about CTE pathways, having speakers come in, being connected in innovative ways. Every time I go to something, I'm just so grateful that this community, people step forward and say, how can we help? We want to help. So that was very apparent at the Scarecrow Festival. And that was really so very fun and so hot in October. But what a joy, and people direction around the school improvement plans. I think we were really struggling with how to do that well and how to do that in a different way. So thank you. I think we have some good ideas.
I just want to give some kudos to basically to all of our staff. We've got some great people when I'm out and about, and I run into some of the teachers and everybody, even the custodians are just so there to support the kids. And Donette, I have heard great things from my friends who drive buses. And so those are the people that I want to hear. I think they do a great job, and they are very happy with the job. And then the kids, this weekend at the Peninsula Farm Tour, I worked with a group of kids doing the cider press. We had a bunch of Peninsula High School kids out there cutting apples and putting them in the machine and pressing them. They were just awesome. Great. So just up and down, we have a great district. Very proud of you.
One highlight for the last, since we last met, I was able to attend with Natalie the first meeting of the CPAC, Special Education and Parent Advisory Committee. And I just really wanted to thank Superintendent Barr and John Yeloise and Lisa Ray and Jana Rush and everybody that has really come together to put that group together. And I think there's a lot of potential there, and it's been a really great opportunity, I think, for a lot. As a mother of a child on an IEP, it's really, I'm so grateful. I feel like the timing, I feel very lucky that it's coming together now, because it's been a bit of deer in the headlights, so I get to wear my parent hat with that and start to learn to navigate this world that, unless you're in it, it's very difficult. It's like school finance, but on the curriculum side, right? So I'm really hopeful for that group, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that evolves with a lot of parent engagement and parent voice being heard in that. So thank you all for putting that together and making it possible. I'm done.
Yeah, I'll keep it super short. I think this week has been custodial and maintenance staff appreciation week, so I just really wanted to give a shout out to those ladies and gentlemen who work for our schools. I know the kids love them. I had an opportunity to serve a football tournament last week, and the custodians from Big River High are involved in pretty much every aspect of student life. They love it. The kids love them. They love getting fed and sharing in all the celebrations. So thanks to everyone who works so hard in that. And just a happy and safe homecoming to our two comprehensive high schools. Kate Harbor is tomorrow, right? And Peninsula next week. I attended the parent district council meeting yesterday, and one of the moms said she likes to go out to eat on these nights because the restaurants are full, and she likes to pick up a tab for a homecoming with all of her kids. So I just thought that was another example of how fantastic our community is. So keep that in mind if you're going out to eat on Saturday night. This week or next week, restaurants are full, but kids drive safely, look out for each other, and have a great day.
Well, I was also going to thank Dan and John, because I know you all come here sometimes, and we do get earfuls sometimes, but it's all in what's good for the kids, and having been seeing the good and the bad during SIP, I'm just hoping you're taking our feedback in a positive way, not any way in a negative way. What's best for kids and our principals, Some of our principals, it's just so bad for them. You get so nervous when you come to schoolwork. I was just going to say, welcome Donette, as a military veteran. And I busted Ashley's chops, and she busted my chops right back. So feel free to bust my chops when you want. But I mean, her husband's Air Force fighter pilot, and she's retired Navy, or former Navy, so it's all good fun.
Somebody in the Air Force who drove a bus, I don't really have a whole lot of ground to give it back.
It's okay, I was a Canadian, I guess.
That's Kate. Ashley made up for it. She's coming good. She's coming good. I want to thank, I didn't get to do Scarecrow Festival. I was at the Washington Conference on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, but I'm glad that I was able to attend that. I want to thank Ashley, Karen, who's not here, Chris, and also Trevor, like Sandler, for being at a retreat on Monday. Some of the board members had never been through a levy and understanding the nuances of it and how to put it together. I think they're much more confused now than they were at the beginning of the week. So, but thanks for being there and working all that through us. And Chris, for your presentation at the last school board meeting, I think that was very helpful for the community to know where we're at, but also for the school board. So I appreciate that. And I think that's, oh, and I'm glad we hired you. So, that's it for me.
I was also going to just point out that it's maintenance and groundskeeper, custodial, and also warehouse staff week. So just really appreciate all those folks and what they do to make the world go round. It's interesting that everyone commented on this. I was going to also say that I had heard that, Dawnette, that you were a rock star, and in fact, I see why I heard that. So we appreciate all your efforts, especially with the grant writing and just going the extra mile to see what you can possibly do to just, support you. Yes, Carol's behind you going, so to speak. I'm like, yes, the actual extra mile. So that we just really appreciate it. It was great to hear the presentation. And the same is true of Ashley. You also, your reputation preceded you, that you were just a superstar, and that's just so true. We really appreciate just the way you present. I've mentioned it before, just saying the fact and quickly following with your interpretation of that, how it affects us differently than others, and so I appreciate that. Which is just really to say we have fantastic people everywhere, and in all the classrooms and staff. So we just appreciate that so much. I think that is all. I loved coming out to Vaughn. Thanks everybody for coming clear out here. I think with some careful, better communication on our part and some planning, this could be really fun in the future. Maybe have some students from the school at the meeting, and so possibly a lot of possibilities. So appreciate everybody coming out. And with that.